This is your host, Mae Renfroe, and just welcome back to another episode of Mighty Monday. I hope that you've had a real good Monday so far, and I'm excited to introduce to you tonight my guest, Danielle Sternquist. And Danielle will be sharing with us her personal journey from trauma to triumph through grief, faith, and resilience. And she's written a book on her story titled I Am Me, which we'll be talking about here. Her book is written to help others who have also gone through traumatic events in life. So I think that's really good, and I'm excited about it. So Danielle, just a big welcome to the podcast. I'm
Thank
glad you could join
you.
me tonight.
Thank you for
Yeah,
having me. I'm happy to share
thank you.
with everybody and hope hope that people get something out of it that can be helpful.
Yes, I believe they will, certainly. What I've been able to read some about your book that you've written on your story and just the things that you shared. Yes, certainly believe so. So, would you like to introduce yourself a bit more to us, and before we get into your story and how you would like to
Sure.
share that tonight?
My name's Danielle, and I live in central Minnesota, and I'm married. And I have actually four adult children, one which has passed. And my I've been married to my husband for 32 years, and we just live on a little hobby farm with two dogs now. We're empty nesters.
Mhm. Oh wow, oh, that sounds
Yeah,
nice.
so and I decided to start doing podcasts after I wrote my book, just to get more out there because I'm not Stephen King or a big name. So I thought this would be a
Yeah,
way to get
yeah.
my story out to other people to help.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. Yeah, podcasting is something really common now. A lot of people do it, and it a pretty easy way to be able to share. I like that it's that easy for people that don't have a big name and ain't
Yeah.
well known and famous. Yeah, like you and I, and so yeah, I know I've got to be on several podcasts too to share, and yeah, it's nice. So I like that you can do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd be happy to share my story with you. And if anybody has any questions, if you could just keep them a little bit towards the end because it gets kind of hard to answer things and then get back into the groove again. But I do appreciate any questions.
Yeah, oh, that's good. Good. Well, you
Okay,
can go
I'll
ahead.
get going then. Yeah.
Yeah.
My book is called Why I Am Me Surviving Grief and Trauma. And my book started out as a journal while I was going through grief counseling. And I was told I should write everything down because I had so many things go wrong in my life from start to
Mhm.
finish that
Mm.
it would be easier for me to get through them and to plow through all the hard parts if things were in order and I could take one section at a time. So I'm going to start about when I was 18 when I got married, but there's a lot before that that you won't hear. That's in my book as well. And I was married at 18 years old, right out of high school. I met my husband actually through a friend. It was a blind date, so they do work. And we were married, and um, about a year later, we ended up having a baby. Maybe it was about a year and a half, I guess. We had a baby, and she, well, she's 40 now, so she's not a baby anymore. And then we had a second son that was about 3 years apart. Um, and my husband worked and I was a stay-at-home mom with my kids. I enjoyed staying home and that's what I always wanted to be in my
Mhm.
lifetime was a mom. So I stayed home with my kids and uh, you know, just did the mom thing. And one day my sister was getting married and so she asked me to be her matron of honor. So we decided to go to the local town and look for dresses. So while we were gone, my husband was supposed to pick up our babysitter who lived just like 3, 4 miles away and bring her back here. And his brother happened to be staying with us at the time. So he stayed with my son Jordan, and just gave him Cheerios and, just watched him till Wes was going to be back with the babysitter. And time as he was coming back, um, unfortunately, we had a railroad crossing right in front of our house, and it didn't have lights and it didn't have arms. It was just, I don't know, for people that live out in the country, it was just a country
Mhm. Mhm.
crossing, and
Yeah,
and
okay,
just
so
a stop
unprotected
sign, yeah. And
crossing.
so he was
Mhm.
coming back, and we were still in town, and he went to cross the tracks, and um, he was hit by a train. And
No.
it
Mhm.
was it's to me, it's still just kind of a shocking thing to even
Mhm.
say, but
Mhm.
the babysitter was with him, and we were good friends with her parents. We went to the same church. We went to a local free church, and uh, I didn't know anything about the accident, but I guess that they um, put it on the radio before I was ever told.
Mm.
And
Oh my
luckily, God
goodness.
was watching out for me because we shut the radio off on our way home because we were talking about wedding
Mhm.
plans. Otherwise, we
Mhm.
would have the radio on. And so
Mhm.
I got home, and the whole yard was filled with cars
Mm.
because this was probably around 3:30, and I think the accident happened at like 2:20.
Mhm.
And so, my mom and his parents were up, and they all the people. And so I came in, but I had no clue what had happened. And
Mhm.
so I just walked into the door, and I just kind of cracked a joke that, I leave and everybody comes and,
Yeah.
throws a party at my house, and
Yeah.
every face
Yeah.
is just dropped. And I had no clue there was an
Mhm.
accident. Like everything was
Yeah.
cleaned up. You couldn't tell anything had
Mhm.
even happened.
Yeah.
So to me, it was just like, why are all these people here? And I'd
Yeah.
never been through anything really bad to,
Yeah.
to compare any bad
Mhm.
accidents or anything like that. So anyway, so they told me about Wes, and it was just excruciating. My luckily my brother took my daughter. She was 5
Mhm.
out for a drive so that she didn't have to be there when I was told. And I just collapsed on the floor because I just didn't know how to even deal with it. I was terrified. I'd never lived on my
Mhm.
own. I went from living with
Mhm.
my mom to living with my husband.
Mhm.
And so I had never lived on my own, and had the kids by myself. And you start thinking about, how am I going to do all this, by myself? And I just went in the bathroom and just shut and locked the door, and just had my head, cried, and got it out of my system a little bit, and went back out because I knew I had to go back out with all the people in my kitchen. And so I went back out, and then they had to tell me that my friend's daughter also had passed away. And
Oh.
to me,
Oh.
that was worse almost,
Mhm.
because nobody really understands what it's like to lose a child, but it would be tough. And I felt so horrible that, Tammy, something had happened to her. She was a senior in high school, just
Mhm.
had made plans to join the Air Force. And so she had her,
Mhm.
plans made out and
Mhm.
everything. And we did the funeral at our church in little local town, and it was just packed with people. And
Mhm.
have do have problems with mental health. I have anxiety and depression problems, and so my doctor right away wanted to put me on something so I wouldn't be so upset. And
Mhm.
so he put me on something, and that whole time during, with the funeral and the visitation and the burial and all that is kind of a blur because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was on medication, and
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
wish now that I hadn't done that, that I would remember everything exactly how it happened. But at the time, I just was too upset to even,
Mhm.
I couldn't even concentrate. And my little guy, he he was 18 months old and he was a little stinker, and he'd run around and get into things and just like normal little toddlers. So they just posted somebody at the steps so he couldn't go down the stairs and just
Mhm.
let him
Mhm.
run,
Okay.
during the,
Yeah.
because there was no
Yeah.
keeping him down. It would have just been
Yeah.
you know, a wrestling match. And so anyway, so after, Wes died, I didn't know how to handle grief at all. I had never really had to handle grief before. At
Mhm.
24 years old, most people haven't had to handle grief yet.
Mm. No.
And
Yeah.
after he died, I just kind of lost it. And I started drinking and going out and doing things that I know now. I mean, I know it wasn't right, but I just couldn't handle it. So that's all I knew to do was
Mhm.
just to try
Mhm.
to numb, I guess,
Mhm.
my feelings. And after about 6 months, I just said, oh, I can't do this anymore. My kids, needed
That's
me. My kids needed me. And I had to get my life together, and we had been going to church really regular up until that point, but I was so angry with God. Not to mention, I would go to church and I would have PTSD flashbacks, and I would see that casket in the front of the
Mm.
church every time I went.
Mm. Oh, yeah.
And I just
Imagine.
couldn't, I just couldn't even go anymore. And so, um, a couple year or a while later, I ended up meeting my current husband, and I wasn't even going to date anymore because I just thought, I just don't think it's for me. And my current husband worked in our county assessor's office, so he came and to reassess my house, which I had asked for
Mhm.
because I had bought it and I felt it wasn't worth as much as they had put on it. So it
Mhm.
was his job to come out and do that. And so I walked around with him and, we talked, and he said he'd let me know. And he ended up calling me and with my estimate. And then he asked me if I would go out to dinner with him.
Mm. Mhm.
And I went out to dinner with him and, we started dating and we ended up getting married. And he had a little boy from a previous marriage. And then I had my two. So we had the three. And our two boys were only a year and a half apart. So they were just like, they had the best time together.
Mhm.
And so, anyway, so we just raised our kids and just did. I showed horses, and with my daughter, she liked to do that. And my kids were in 4-H and showed dogs. And in in between times, we had been trying to have a baby. After about 5 years of marriage, we decided we wanted to have a baby. And so we were trying and trying, and it just wasn't going to happen. And I turned, it was about, I was about 38. And I just finally said, this isn't going to work because it just wasn't happening. And
Mhm.
now I got to put my other glasses on. My face is just like,
No, it's okay.
it's hot. Anyways, anyway, so we just decided to quit trying. And that was, in the fall. And
Mm.
I found out right after New Year's I was pregnant.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, okay, after all this trying and now,
Yeah.
after I decided we weren't going to do it anymore.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
anyways, it was kind of a
Oh,
joke on me, I guess. But
yeah.
so, anyways, we
Yeah.
had this wonderful little boy, and he was just the kids loved him. My daughter was graduating from high school and I was 6 months pregnant. And my son was 15 and Bill's son was about 14 when we had Devin. So anyhow, so yeah, it worked out really well. The kids just loved him. Um, it was
Mm.
always a joke though, because when we go places, they always thought that Devin was my daughter's baby,
Oh, okay.
not
Oh, okay.
mine. Yeah, my
Yeah,
son
yeah,
was my
okay, I
daughter's
can see that
baby, and
that could happen.
and
Yeah.
so, anyways, yeah, it was always a joke about, it's like, no, no, I'm not the grandma yet.
Yeah,
So,
not yet.
yeah, so the kids, grew up and moved. My daughter moved out, and my son um, was in, he graduated high school in 2006. And then he wanted to go into the Marine Corps. So he had signed up and everything to go into the Marine Corps. So he left like 6 days after high school
Mhm.
for boot
Oh,
camp.
wow.
Yeah, so it was hard because I
I
mean,
bet.
he was going to go to California, and yeah, it's different, that's for sure. And so he went to boot camp and he loved it. He said that he just loved it, but he had ADHD, and so he liked the structure
Oh,
because
okay.
I had
Mhm.
always made sure to have structure for him as he was growing up. So once he hit like junior high, he didn't have to be on medication anymore because he learned how to structure himself.
Mm.
So he liked the Marine Corps because everything is structured. And so he graduated boot camp, came home for a couple weeks, and then he had to go out east. He went out to, it's called Fort George Meade, for schooling. And his
Mhm.
schooling was to be a videographer.
Mm.
So
Oh,
he
wow.
went out there, and he loved the schooling. And after school, then they tell you where you're going to get stationed. And he got stationed at Quantico, Virginia.
Mm.
And they call it Salute City because it's so many like generals and higher ups that every time you walk past one, you have to salute.
Oh,
So you're
okay.
constantly saluting
Oh,
wherever you go.
yeah. Oh,
But
wow.
he loved his job. He met a lot of really good friends um, at Quantico, and he would help run the news station. He'd have to put on if there was bad weather or things were closed, things like that.
Mhm.
But he also did video shoots of things like the Marine Corps Marathon. And he would have been the person they would have called if the president would pass away and need it,
Mhm.
recorded. So that would have been his job.
Mm. Mhm.
Nobody ever did while he was there. So that was good. But so yeah, that was his job. And while he was there, he was 22. So he'd been there a couple of years. And he called me one day and asked me how I would think he would have blood on his pillow in the morning when he woke up, or why he would have that. And I said, I don't have a clue other than, when he was little, he used to grind his teeth, and
Mm.
his I
Mm.
thought, well, maybe you were grinding your teeth and you bit your cheek or bit your tongue, something like that. And so, yeah, he said maybe. And so he went, and, it happened a couple more times, and he just couldn't figure out what was going on. And then he got called out to do a video shoot at this, it's called Tattoo. And what it is it's a battle of the bands, but it's bands from like
Mm.
all over the world, like marching bands from
Oh,
different,
okay.
like the Marine Corps band
Yeah.
was there, and there would be bands from, Sweden and, all over anyway. So he went there to videotape that. Plus, there was a bunch of other people, photographers that went with them. And so they had a driver in a van, which was really nice that he didn't have to drive. And
Yeah.
so when they got done, it was really late. It was like midnight, and they were just going to go to a bar and have a burger and a beer, And as they were driving, he was really tired, so he just started dozing off a little bit. And when he was dozing off, he went into a grand mal seizure.
Mm.
And his friends were on the bus with him, or in the van with him, and they had to pull him out of the van and lay him down on the sidewalk. And one of them ran in and had him call 911 for an ambulance. And then there was a nurse in there, and she came out and, got him on his side and put um, something under his head so he wouldn't hit his head on the cement, that kind of thing. And his seizure lasted probably 5 to 7 minutes, which is actually quite a long seizure.
Oh, sounds like.
Now, I'm going to backtrack just a little bit and tell you about when he was a baby. Because when he was a baby, at 7 months old, I came in from work and he like projectile vomited across my living room.
Mm.
And after he did that, he went into a seizure.
Mhm.
And we took him to the hospital, and that seizure lasted 45 minutes. And they had to give him phenobarbital, which is, they didn't have a lot of seizure medications back then. And
Mhm.
they gave him phenobarbital, and the doctor happened to be an old Navy doctor. And he said, I gave him enough phenobarbital to put a horse down. Yeah, something you want to hear about your 7-month-old baby,
Oh,
And
oh boy.
he ended up spending like a week in the hospital, and they felt it was just caused by a
Mhm. Mhm.
fever seizure.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
so, we weren't that concerned, but they kept him on the phenobarbital for 6 months, and he hadn't had any more seizures, which was great. And so then he was able to go off of the medication. And then at 2, he had another seizure. And it was the same thing. It was from a high fever. And that one lasted 20 minutes. And these
Mhm.
are
Mhm.
totally not normal. A
Mhm.
normal seizure lasts 1 to 3 minutes.
Oh,
And
okay.
so
Wow.
we found out later that those kind of seizures, when they're really prolonged like that, can predispose people from having seizures as adults. But at the time, we didn't know that. And
Mhm.
so after he'd had the seizure, after his the one where they had to put him on the sidewalk, he
Yeah.
ended up having
Okay.
to
Yeah.
go to, what's that?
Yeah. Okay. I was just nodding. Yeah.
Oh, he had to go to Walter Reed, to the
Mhm.
medical center, to see a neurologist. And they do a bunch of testing. They did what's called an EEG, where they put like electrodes on your scalp and they measure your brain activity. And that didn't show anything. And then she did an MRI, and it came back that he had scar tissue in his left temporal lobe, which would be like right into here.
Mhm.
And so she said that's what's causing your seizures, and you have epilepsy.
Mm.
Because she said the blood on the pillow was nocturnal seizures. Some people just have nocturnal seizures that only happen at night.
Mhm.
Um, but then once he started having seizures, they would happen any random times. He would get auras, is what they call them, where he would get a queasy stomach and he'd know he was going to have a seizure.
Mm.
So he got really good about, if he thought he was going to have a seizure, he'd sit down, no matter
Mhm.
where he was at.
Mhm.
and he was with friends, and they went to like Home Depot or something, and they come around the corner and he's sitting on the floor, and they're like, "Why are you sitting on the floor?" He goes,
Yeah.
"Oh, I thought I was going to have a seizure and I didn't want to fall."
Okay.
Because you could crack your head open on the cement or whatever. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so, they said, "Oh, that makes sense then," that's why
Yeah.
he was sitting on the floor. But his friends were really good. They all watched out for him. He did have several more seizures while he was at Quantico. Um, One in the mess hall where they ate, and they ended up taking him to the hospital for that because his seizures lasted longer than what they should have.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then you have to go in. After a
Mhm.
certain amount of
Mhm.
minutes, you have to go in.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
he ended up, they retired him out of the military, a medical retirement, they call it. Now, a lot of people just get told, you can't be in the military anymore because you have this or the other thing. But I told him to just kind of fight that, because if you get medical retirement, you get to keep your health insurance. If he isn't
Mhm.
going to be able to work a job, where is he going to get health insurance?
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's what he ended up doing. I told him to go talk to an attorney on base, and he did. And he ended up getting disability at 44%, which is what he needed to keep his insurance.
Mhm.
So he ended up coming home, and this was in 2011 that he came home in the fall. And he decided he wanted to go to college right away. So he signed up right away for college for start in January for the spring semester. And he went to school and he loved it, but he didn't drive. He always rode his bike everywhere, even in the winter, because he had such a fear that if he would have a seizure while he's driving, he could hurt somebody else. And
Mhm.
my kids were always caring like that, that he would think
Mhm.
about somebody else. And so he um, went to school, and then he had the summer off, and him and his buddies hung out. And he was a BMX bike rider. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but he'd do different jumps, and
Mhm.
they would make like these poles that they would jump their bikes up onto and do different
Okay. Yeah. I've
things
seen that.
like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
him and his buddies all like to do that, and Darian, my stepson, also liked to do that. So they did that together, and had a really, really good time with that. And then in the fall, he started school back again. And in October, he hadn't had any seizures all this time. The medicine was doing really well, keeping him
Mhm.
seizure free. And so, um, just lost my train of thought. 1 second. Anyway, so he hadn't had any seizures. So in October, then all of a sudden, I was talking to him on the phone, and you guys don't even understand. He would call me just about every day at 3:30 and say, "Hello, mother dear," and "How's your day
Aw.
going?" And he was
Aw.
he we
That's
just had a
special.
really good special relationship.
Mhm.
And so I was talking to him on the phone like I usually did, and my daughter worked in town where we lived, or where he lived, I should say. And all of a sudden, I could hear banging around, and I was like, "Jordan, Jordan," and it wasn't. I All of a sudden, I'm just like, he's having a seizure. I know he's having a seizure, and so I ended up calling my daughter and saying, "Will you please go check on him?" And she left work, and she was only a few blocks from where he lived, from where she worked. And she said she went there, and he was just wandering around and didn't really know what was going on. And it's called, in epilepsy, it's called a post-ictal state. And it comes after the seizure's over.
Mhm.
And a lot of times they're really tired, they're really, you know, really out of it.
Mhm.
And so she was like, what are you looking for? What can I help you with? And he's like, well, I can't find my wallet. It was in his back pocket. And I don't know why he was even looking for it. He probably didn't even know why he was looking for it. And she called me back and I said, you better take him up to the hospital and just have him checked over to make sure he's okay. And they did, and they said he needed to see his doctor at the VA because he went to the VA clinic because of his, you know,
Yeah.
his Marine history. And so he went there, and I drove him usually if we had to go to appointments like that. And so I
Yeah.
drove him, and the doctor didn't show up. This was October, so it wasn't weather related, nothing. So the doctor just didn't show up. And they said, well, you'll have to come back in a week. And so we did. And when we went back there, and this is just general practitioner, mind you, we went back there and they said that he needed to see the neurologist in the cities, in the big city where we live, or
Mhm.
in our state. So, anyways, we ended up, he got an appointment. They called him with an appointment because you don't make the appointment, they call you with an appointment. And so they called with an appointment, and it was 70 days out from um, from the time that he got the appointment. He would have to wait 70 days to get in. And this was during the time when we were having just tons of problems with the VA in
Mhm.
the United States. There were problems out in Arizona, problems with them not doing things properly, or, you know, just not seeing people like they should. And so we didn't really know anything. I guess I wasn't very proactive about it because I didn't know I could do anything. He was an adult. What could I do really as a mom? If he was 16, I could do something. I could be
Mhm.
his
Mhm.
advocate.
Mhm.
So, anyways, the while we were waiting for that appointment, he went for another month without any seizures, and it was Thanksgiving. And we were all at my mom's house, and my uncle, who happened to do the picture and do the cover for my book, he's also a photographer. So he came and he did a bunch of family photos, which was great because we just really didn't have
Mhm.
much for family
Mhm.
photos. Um, and so he came and did the family photos and everything. And we came home, and my husband he dropped me off, and I gave him Jordan a hug and said see you later, and my husband drove him home. Well, that Monday, the 26th of November, my kids were in 4-H. Some people don't know what that is, but it's a club for kids. A lot
Right.
of farm kids are in it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so my kids were all in 4-H. And my youngest son, he was like 10 at the time, and he did his dog in his dog project, and they really loved it. And so we were having the meeting. We always took turns at different people's houses having the meeting, and it happened to be at my house. And so we were just in the middle of this meeting, and there's a knock on the door, and it was a county sheriff. And I didn't really like freak out about it right away because um we live right on a major highway. So I kind of thought, we've had them stop before when they're looking for somebody, or have I seen, a car drive down this way or anything like that. So I didn't really think anything of it until he asked if he could speak with us in the downstairs in the family room.
Mhm.
And so I said, yeah. And
Mhm.
we went downstairs, and he proceeded to tell me that Jordan died
Mhm.
that night. And he died from what they call sudden unexpected death and epilepsy.
Okay.
And I
Mm.
didn't know anything about that. I'd never heard of that before.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we were just in shock. My daughter happened to be there too because her little ones were going to be in 4-H with us. And so they were there. And my mom came up, and, family came and stuff. And we sat up all night, and the coroner called me at like 3 in the morning, because he had to have a autopsy. And the reason
Mhm.
he had to have
Mhm.
an
Mhm.
autopsy is because when he passed away, he was home, his roommates weren't home. He was home alone. And when they came in, they just found him face first on his computer.
Yeah.
And they tried to revive him. They tried to do CPR, and they called, for the ambulance and the rescue people. And the rescue people worked on him for 45 minutes. And it just, they just couldn't bring him back. So down the road, I found out that this sudden unexpected death in epilepsy, very rarely can they bring anybody back from it, because we think that what it's doing is hitting their brain stem and shutting down
Mhm.
all the
Mhm.
automatic, like your heartbeat and your breathing. It shuts it all down. And it's almost like, I almost think of it like a computer chip that fries. I mean, it sounds weird, but it's like if something fries in your computer like that, it's not going to work no matter what you
Mhm.
do to it,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And that's kind of how I
Mhm.
think of it, because I guess
Mhm.
it's just easier for me to think of it that way. But so anyways, I talked to the coroner and everything, and he was super super nice. And I saw, we had been poring over Google trying to figure out what could he have died from, that
Mhm.
night
Mhm.
afterwards,
Mhm.
because no,
Mhm.
we weren't going to sleep. And so I ran across that um, shortened version. It's called SUDEP. I ran across that, and so when he called me, I told him, I said, well, he had epilepsy. I said, could it be SUDEP? And he said, absolutely. He said, if none of the toxicology comes back, like that he was doing drugs or something like that,
Mhm.
then
Mhm. Mhm.
definitely I would say that's what it is.
Mhm.
And so when he had to do his death certificate, I asked him to put that on there, because I felt that this can't just be happening to him. And so I got in touch with the state epilepsy foundation and got really involved with them. And I went to a national conference called PAMI, Partners Against Mortality and Epilepsy.
Mhm.
And I've gone 2 or 3 times. The first time I went, or second time I went, I spoke
Mhm.
about grief.
Mhm.
And we all had things we had to speak about. I mean, some of us family members, had different
Mhm.
things to speak about. And so, anyway, I learned a lot at those PAMI meetings about epilepsy, and I started doing a lot of um, speaking at like veterans,
Okay.
you know, the I forget what they're called. I'm sorry, I have long COVID, so sometimes I forget I
Okay.
forget words and stuff.
Well, that's
Um,
okay.
like the Legion. You know what the Legion is,
Mhm.
where
Mhm.
they have like meetings and stuff for
Mhm. Yep.
veterans. Yeah. So I went to a bunch of those places and tried to teach them about epilepsy, because that was kind of in the middle of the Iraq War, and so there were a lot of people coming back with head trauma and coming back with
Mhm.
epilepsy from head trauma. And so
Mhm.
I just thought that that would be really helpful to them to
Mhm.
have some idea of what's going on.
Mhm.
But they weren't really very receptive. So I just kind of let it go. And I decided after a while I had to take some time off. Um, because I had been putting a lot of time into it. Me and my daughter had gone out to Quantico with his friends and did um, a video to put on YouTube and stuff for just help talking about Suit Up.
Mhm.
And so we've done a lot of that kind of thing. And so that's kind of why I wrote my book, is because I just felt like I needed to get all this off of my chest and really talk about it. And we had been, once again, going to church. We had gone to another church, me and my husband, and then we had to have my son's funeral there. And it's just like, I was just so angry with God. How can he do this to me twice? And it took me a
Mhm.
long
Mhm.
time. Like, it's been 12 years. And
Mhm.
it took me till about a year
Mhm.
and a half ago when I decided that, it wasn't God that did this to him. You
Mhm.
know,
Mhm. Yeah.
it happens.
Yeah.
We're human and it just
Yeah.
happens. But sometimes it's hard to not feel that way. Um, But
Mhm.
I've been a Christian since I was a little girl, and I haven't always been a good practicing Christian. But in fact, I just finished reading the Bible in a year. That was my goal for this year. And
Okay.
so I'm really putting 110% in.
Mhm. Mhm.
I feel like, I know Jesus is the only way.
Mhm.
Jesus is the way to heaven. Jesus is, he's my everything. And
Mhm.
so I've just been really spending a lot of time with him after I wrote my book, and now I'm working on another book about Jordan
Mhm.
and
Oh,
about
okay.
the things that we went through with Jordan.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so yeah. So that's you know, my story. And
Mhm.
it's hard to tell, sometimes it's hard to remember.
Yeah.
I probably should write things down, but then I'd be constantly looking down. And sometimes I think it's
Yeah.
better just
Yeah. Yeah.
talk
Just from
about
your
it, and
yeah. Yeah.
you
Just
know
from your memory.
just from my memory, and try to
Mhm.
keep it in
Mhm. Mhm.
in somewhat of an
Yeah.
organized speech.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well,
so
thank
yeah,
you.
I'd be happy to answer any
For
questions if you have questions.
Yeah. 5. I don't see that any came in on our someone just asked how we were doing, but
Right.
um yeah, I don't yeah, really have any more. But just thank you for sharing all that, and that it was quite a journey for you to walk
Yeah,
that
I
out
can never
with
get
your
through it
son.
without tearing up. So
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
I
No,
apologize for that. But
for sure. And I like that you're trying to help others now in that
right. And that's,
same
I wrote
thing.
the
And
story partly for me, partly for other people, but
mhm,
I felt called to do the podcasts
mhm, mhm, mhm,
because and to speak, because I've done it
mhm,
before. Generally, if I'm going to speak out and about, I have it, on note cards or whatever, if I'm
mhm,
going to be
mhm.
doing a big national speech. But I feel like when I do the podcast, I almost feel like I'm just talking to a friend. I don't feel
Yeah.
like, I don't want it to be so structured, as
Mhm.
you would if you were speaking
Yeah.
someplace.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's how I like to podcast. Yeah. Yeah. And so your book, the one that that's a picture of it behind you there.
yeah, I
Why
also
am
have
I
a copy of
me?
it here. I'll move over.
Okay. I mean,
Maybe it'd be
okay.
easier to
Yeah.
see it on the
Yeah.
picture.
Okay. And see that. Good. So that's available on Amazon. Yeah. So then that uh tells well what you shared here of losing your first husband and then your son, and then just
Mhm.
and it's giving that encouragement for others, right? And I like how you said that you were angry with God and you wonder why did he allow this to happen. And
Mhm.
that's fair. We we do that. But
Well, one thing my
and he
mom
meets
had
us there, right?
yeah, and
In
one
that
thing my
questioning.
mom said
Mhm.
is God's got big shoulders he can handle if you're upset with him.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's, that's
Yeah.
it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
and even if you're angry, you get angry at your parents sometimes
Yeah.
and you get over it and you move
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
and so I don't really think it's any different. He's our
Yeah.
father, in heaven, and so yeah.
He understands, and he is inviting us into that intimate relationship with him. And the more that we care, like you said, you're getting in the Word more and really want to just get to know God, and right, and that's what the more we get to know Him, the more we know that we can trust Him. When we know that
Right,
He is good and that He is there for us, and that this is
right,
part of the world we live in, like you mentioned, this is this is human. This is life here. That we will go through things. There will be loss and grief and death and sometimes sorrow and sickness. But He said, "You will have peace in Me. In this world, you have
right,
tribulation. In
right,
Me, you will have
right,
peace." Right, and so you'll still have that
right.
peace. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so and as far as my book goes, I wouldn't recommend it for anybody under 13.
Okay.
And the reason being is because I had some abuse issues when I was little
Oh, okay, okay.
that I mean, I'm not explicit in it, but
Yeah,
it might be confusing for somebody younger.
yeah,
So I just
okay.
try to tell people that, that there's some things in there that, you might not want your younger children to read.
Yeah, okay. No, for
So,
sure. Wow. So
so
you've
yeah.
been through a lot, but God has met you and kept you going. I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm still actually going to counseling. And I
Mhm,
had quit and I was doing really good, and then all of a sudden I started having anxiety problems again.
mm,
And so I'm back going to a Christian counselor. I found a really good Christian counselor that I was really happy with. And so I'm starting back up with her again for a while. And, it's the hard thing about losing a child, I think, is that it's
mm,
always there.
mhm,
And,
yeah,
you know, I'm not ashamed to admit that I need help
mhm,
at times.
mhm,
And my counselor, like I said, she's a Christian counselor, and she's just been really, really wonderful and very helpful
mhm.
and gives me ideas on how to
Good,
cope
that's
with
good.
things.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So when we need that, I think that's good too.
Mhm.
I had another guest on that was really encouraging those going through things and was finding it hard. That God, yes, is your your hope and your peace and your rock. But she's like, but sometimes we need that therapy, that
Right,
that counseling, and that is very important too. And really encouraged those to find that, to get that. And so yeah, I would
right,
agree. Good that you can encourage others that there is a place for that, and um, they can just help you see maybe the other side, the positive in these things, and yeah,
right, right.
that's good.
Yeah, and like I said, I had COVID and then I developed long COVID because I do have some underlying health conditions, and
Mhm,
and I'm not so sure that the anxiety isn't from that,
mhm,
because long
mhm,
COVID can cause all kinds of weird stuff. Um, and mine seems to be tracking towards a neurological
mhm,
problem. So,
mhm,
but there's nothing, the hard thing is there's nothing they can do about it yet. They don't know how to fix it.
mhm, mhm,
And there's millions of people out there who have it. So,
mhm.
yeah, it's
Oh,
frustrating.
yeah, yeah. Have to try to just trust in the Lord and know that He knows best, and He's on the throne, and
And I
He
pray
is
for
with you regardless of what you go through.
yeah, and I pray every night for
Mhm,
healing.
mhm,
And it'll come when it's time, when
mhm.
it's his time. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Well, thank you
yeah.
so much for having me, May. I really appreciate
Yeah.
it. And yeah, I hope it turns out.
You.
I don't watch mine back because I get too embarrassed.
Okay. Yeah. No, I
But
think
yeah,
it's good. It's good. And I just thank you so much for sharing that in your book, and
yeah.
yeah, to encourage people to get your book, and why I am me, and on Amazon. So yeah, thank you
Okay,
again,
sounds good.
Janelle. Take care. All the
All
best to
right.
you, and you're writing your next book and everything
Yeah.
you do. And
All
everybody, I
right.
just wish you, yeah, everyone's a great week, and I'll be back here next Monday for Monday Live. Okay, take care again, Danelle.
Thanks. Bye bye.